Hey guys, Tammy here. And in this video, I'm going to talk about 3 ways to cope when you have little or no parenting time. One of the common things I see is that cases kind of start out with what I would refer to as a bang, right? You have either some sort of temporary restraining order or protective order. It's called different things in different jurisdictions, but you have some kind of order that, restrains you from interacting with the other parent. And a lot of times children are made part of that order. And we find ourselves going long periods of time without seeing our children, which is heartbreaking, especially when you've been a very involved, hands on parent or your child is very, very young and you're making the effort to bond with them. So, before we dive into this topic, let me just remind you, if you like this content and find it helpful, don't forget to hit like on this video. Also, subscribe to the channel so that you get notified as new videos are released. And as always, please feel free to share this information on social media. Large number of people struggling for this kind of information. When we go into a situation where our time with our kids is limited, I know that it's really heartbreaking and it can cause a lot of grief for us. I mean, what you have to understand is it's sudden loss of your family, right? It's a lot of times sudden disruption of everything you knew. It changes, you don't have a mate, you don't have your kids there. A lot of times you're displaced from your home. Many times you didn't get to get a lot of your personal belongings or sometimes none of your personal belongings from your home. And so you're completely displaced. Everything in your life is different with the exception of maybe your job or your work or whatever. And then we kind of will sometimes go, I have clients say, "What's wrong with me?" Well, hello, what's wrong with you is a form of grief because everything has been stripped. If you've listened to the channel for any length of time, you probably know my husband passed away suddenly about 2 years ago. We're coming up on 2 years soon. And that's exactly what it was, right? It's just life as I knew it completely disappeared the day of his accident, and it's never come back and never looked like that again. Now, that doesn't mean you can't build a new, better, more improved, happier life. And I know that's true because I did it the first time with my divorce. But in the interim, that's not always a lot of comfort for people. And it's a struggle to be away from your kids, especially if you were a very involved and hands on parent. I think a lot of times the fact that most people feel like a lot of the allegations that they come up against are false allegations. And so it feels very unfair to them. And they really struggle with the injustice of the system. And it's like, how can a system come in and just take my child from me and there's nothing I can do? That's what it feels like from that parent's side. Okay. And while I understand it, the perspective that we have to take on this is the court's primary agenda is to ensure the safety of your child. So anytime somebody makes an allegation, what happens is the court goes, okay, we're going to freeze everything as is, and we're going to investigate and figure out what's actually going on so that we can make the appropriate orders. But in the meantime, we're going to kind of hit the freeze frame button. And so whatever that freeze frame is in that moment, that's where you find yourself, right? And again, very, very challenging. But what you have to keep in mind is that over the long haul, as the court does investigate and does figure this out, everything should find its equilibrium of what's appropriate or what's warranted in your case. If you're both adequate parents and nobody's abusive and all the allegations are false, well, then you're going to find yourself in a co-parenting situation, having time with your kids and going and doing all those kinds of things eventually, right? And if you're not, and the abuse allegations are true or whatever, then there's going to be an appropriate plan for that too, which usually involves some supervised visitation, classes, and different things to try to ensure that there isn't a safety concern for the children in the future. Okay. Now, I don't want to say that just because you're on supervised visitation, there's automatically an assumption that any of the abuse is correct. Again, the or is true, I should say. Again, the court kind of puts a freeze on it and they go, okay, we're going to do this temporary thing as if the allegations are true until we figure out if they are or not. And I know that's kind of backwards in our head because we are always taught innocent until proven guilty, right? And this sort of feels like guilty until proven innocent. But we have to remember about family court is their agenda is not guilt or innocence. Their agenda is safety of the child, and they're going to preserve that above everything else. So here's how I tell people to cope, or how I recommend people cope when they're in this situation. I think one of the first things we do a lot of times is we rail against it, and we're so angry because it's unfair and it's unjust, and I'm grieving and I'm not seeing my child, and frankly I'm angry. I'm angry that this could even happen. I'm angry about the whole situation. And rightfully so. I get that. If you are being falsely accused, you have every right to be angry about it, okay? But what you have to do in the meantime is not get reactive, because if someone's accusing you of being angry and then you are being abusive or whatever, and then you react in anger, what do you think that does for the abuse allegation? Actually confirms it. I remember my late husband having a case several years ago where he tried the case, and he actually felt like that the permanent restraining order shouldn't be put in place. He was representing the person that was accused of the abuse. And at the end of it, the judge made a comment that when that person was testifying, they appeared very, very angry still at the other person and all of that. And so the judge is like, you know what? I'm going to temporarily put this in place for a while because I think that other person does need some protection from your, some kind of boundary in there from your level of anger that you still seem to be harboring. Try to deal with those feelings and try to let go of some of that resentment. I understand you're angry at your ex. Okay. That's warranted. That's understandable. You can't act on that anger, even though those feelings are valid. But for the court, you have to understand it's not personal, right? And I think that that's one of the only ways that you can avoid feeling that level of anger and resentment in the courtroom, and because you definitely don't want that to come across in the courtroom. And so what you have to tell yourself is like, look, these people are trying to get to the bottom of what's happening so that we can figure out what a correct parenting plan is going to be. The funny thing is, all these people around you are the people that have the ability to help you with your case. But if you go in like a bull in a china shop, none of these people are going to, you're going to make them all angry. They're all going to feel like you're exhibiting the exact behaviors the other person is accusing you of, and you're not going to get near as far. So one of the first things that you have to do is adhere to all of your court orders. Okay. If you go in and you have a temporary restraining order and you're restricted from seeing the other person and the children, don't talk to them. Don't see them. Don't be where they are. Don't go where the kids are. Don't do any of those things. Do not violate the order. Okay. That's very, very important. I have seen people who have been found guilty of violations of the original order, even though they weren't found guilty of the original accusation of abuse, but because they were guilty of violations, they ended up with an order against them anyway. Okay, so you don't want to compound the problem. You want to make sure that you're adhering to the order, and you want to make sure that you are seeing your children as much as you're allowed. So if you're on supervised visitation, go. I can't tell you how many times I've had people say, well, I shouldn't have to pay somebody. I shouldn't have to sit and be supervised with my own children, and I've been raising them for years. And that's that resentment coming through. That's that attitude coming through, which again is only confirming the behaviors that you're being accused of when you react in that way. Your sort of stance, and the stance that the court wants to see, is I'll do whatever it takes to see my kids. If I got to crawl across broken glass, if I got to come up with enough money to pay 10 people to be able to see the kid, if I got to, whatever I got to do, I'm going to figure it out and I'm going to see the kid. If I got to work 2 jobs, if I got to whatever, you want to be exercising as much of the parenting time that you're allotted as you possibly can. So if you're allotted 5 hours a week of supervised visitation, you want to be taking 5 hours a week of supervised visitation. Okay. Now, look, I know that sometimes money is a problem, or I know sometimes work schedules are a problem, or whatever. But what I'm telling you is this is a crisis point, and you need to do everything you can to make that happen. And if you can't make it happen, you make as much of it happen as you possibly can. Okay, that's job one. Job number two is focus on yourself. Okay, like understand and give yourself grace for the fact that you are grieving in this process. Okay, and this is your time to really be able to reconnect with friends, with family, with previous hobbies, with all the things you haven't had time to do since you had kids, right? That's what this is time for. And, there are seasons in life. And I heard something this week where a guy said something along the lines of, you only get so many summers in your life. There are only so many days with a loved one that we have. And okay, I understand you're losing those days with your kid, and those are limited, and it sucks, and I get it. But you know what? Days are also limited with your mom, your sister, your niece, your nephew, your whatever. And so we want to use this time to take advantage of spending the time with those people that we haven't gotten to while we were busy parenting. Okay. That's real important that you focus on yourself, that you take time. I talk about self care a lot. All those things are important. Self care, reconnecting with family, focusing on your career goals. Do you want to go back to school? Do you want to start a business? Do you want to something that you can get excited about, something that you can feel positive about, where you're not just laying in bed all day going, oh, I don't get to see my kid. It's again, it's a form of grief, and you have to do those same things that any other grieving person would do, which is try to find something, even if it's one thing that brings you joy, and try to do that thing as often as you possibly can. The other thing I think that you have to do that's really important is you have to educate yourself on what things that you can do to help the court see that you take this situation seriously. I recently recommended to somebody, hey, if you're accused of this DV, why don't you at the very least go take an anger management class? And somebody said, well, isn't that me agreeing that I have anger management problems? No, it shows the court that you have nothing to hide, that you're going to do whatever they want you to do. You're not going to be drug kicking and screaming. It's like when I have parents where they're ordered to take a drug test. It's like, well, why should I have to take a drug test? I don't need it. That's the first sign that you need to take a drug test, when you start getting defensive about it. If a court said to me, hey, you can see your kids every single week, but you got to go over here and take a drug test every single week to get to do that, I'd be like, okay, where's the drug facility? Where do I go? I'll take one right now. Why? Because that's going to come back negative every single time, because I don't do any kind of drug. So it's not an issue for me at all. So you want to show the court that this isn't an issue for you at all, that you're willing to go and learn and educate yourself and do whatever it is they think you need to do. So I tell people, like, get into therapy, take an anger management class. If you are being accused of a DV, take a batterers program. That's a 52-week program. If you are, if you have a very, very young child and you're a first-time parent, go take a parenting class about babies or infants or whatever the case may be, so that you're showing the court that you're actively working to try to solve the concerns that the court has. That's who you have to convince, okay? We don't get focused on your ex, which is where everybody focuses. You have to focus on the person that has the power to make the decision, and that's your judge. If you'd like more help with this kind of issue, or you're a parent that's not getting as much parenting time as you want, and you want help strategizing with that and figuring out a path forward, you can go to divorceuniversityonline.com/VIP-coaching. There's information on that page on my group coaching programs for moms and for dads. And there's also a link where you can book a call if you think your case is complex, or you would like a high level of support for my VIP one-on-one premium services. All right. Thanks for joining me. I'll see you guys next time. We'll grow in number, fueled by them to see the